Hello everyone. I want to begin by acknowledging and honoring the Potawatomi, Odawa, and Ojibwe tribes, the original people of the land upon which my home institution, Northwestern University, stands in the location where I'm recording right now, as well as the native people who remain on this land today. I also want to thank the organizers of this symposium, particularly Sylvia, for inviting me to contribute this paper, as well as the community members who work with me as part of the Aventura Archaeology Project. The title of my talk today is Ordinary Histories of People and Place, Reconsidering Heritage at Aventura, Belize. The archaeological site of Aventura emerges from the countryside as a series of large green hills, seen here on the slide, to the west of the Northern Highway, just to the south of the contemporary village of San Joaquin in the Corozal District of Belize. In this paper, I present insights shared with me while touring and working at the archaeological site of Aventura by community members who live and work the sugarcane fields and forests that now cover the majority of archaeological features. While working at the site to explore its ancient Maya history, locals have shared with me the more recent history of their coming to occupy northern Belize in the mid-19th century, and the ways physical places on the landscape have been charged by supernatural encounters and specific moments of specific family significance. By centering local meaning-making practices, this paper aims to turn attention away from a model that positions foreign archaeologists as heritage educators and turns to a multi-directional model of community collaboration where the expertise of all participants is valued and centered in discussions of heritage education and outreach. I aim to show how community collaboration requires effort on the part of archaeologists to learn and value local histories and practices of meaning-making, while providing resources for locals to reinterpret the ancient past that European colonizers actively erased. Over the past 30 to 50 years, a central question of archaeological practice and research has centered on the ethics of collaborating with descended communities. Recent scholarship on this topic has emphasized the importance of acknowledging the rights and knowledge of indigenous groups. While heritage is a theoretical tool that documents the social value of places, things, and environments, scholars have critiqued the ways heritage is essentialized, abstracted, and mobilized around issues of tourism and nationalism that result in the marginalization of local communities. This paper considers what it means to engage with a community in which colonial histories have actively erased locals' connections to their ancient Maya ancestors. To do so, it examines the relationship between ordinary people and archaeological spaces and discusses how a better understanding of this relationship can shape engagement efforts by foreign archaeologists. Turning specifically to the everyday encounters that shape my interlocutors' relationships to archaeological remains, I argue that community engagement can better attune to the needs and desires of local stakeholders. The Corozal District is located along Belize's northernmost border with Mexico. The district capital, Corozal Town, was officially founded in 1849 by residents who fled Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, seeking refuge from the Caste War, which ranged from 1847 to 1855. The community's origin story is commemorated by a mural painted by the late Manuel Villamor, a Corozal native, which is located in the town hall of the district capital of Corozal Town. In its original form, which was painted or drawn in 1953, Villamor's black and white mural depicts the violence endured by refugees of the Caste War. While its later formulations, which was most recently updated in 2014, the mural focuses on the birth and history of Corozal in the aftermath of the Caste War. Important to our discussion today is how this mural conveys and illustrates the violent history of the contemporary community's ancestry and their complicated relationships to the Maya who occupied the ancient landscape. I aim to show that these connections, while tenuous and not always up for foreign archaeologists to debate, are still important factors which shape how archaeological spaces can become meaningful and significant in the day-to-day lives of contemporary community members. San Joaquin Village, located approximately 10 kilometers south of Corozal town, is a smaller village which lies just outside the remains of the ancient Maya city known as Aventura. I have worked at the site as a member of the Aventura Archaeology Project, directed by Dr. Cynthia Robin, since its inception in the summer of 2015. Through the course of conducting survey and excavation at the site as part of my dissertation research, I've worked closely with over 30 members of the local community and gotten to know their families and an even larger portion of the community through engagement events, such as tours of the archaeological site and heritage events such as Aventura Archaeology Day, which have been co-sponsored with the National Institute of Culture and History. While conducting this work, I became interested in the stories my colleagues would share about their engagement with archaeological spaces. Unlike sites conserved for tourism, like the nearby site of Santa Rita, also known as Choctamal, which are the common subject of heritage discourse, Aventura is an unconserved site that is frequently engaged with by residents who manage the sugarcane fields or hunt in the bush that now covers the mounded remains of the ancient city. What is important to this discussion is that since it is not designated as a formal archaeological reserve or tourist destination, Aventura's boundaries are not policed by armed guards or fences. Residents of the local community have regular access to the archaeological features and have integrated these spaces into their own sense of belonging to the local landscape. In taking up the idea of local heritage and ancestry, I consider the ways this sense of belonging to a landscape with deep archaeological history enables locals to navigate tensions in their own understandings of what it means to have Maya ancestry in the present. In working at and touring the site with my colleagues, I've become interested in the ways locals narrate moving through archaeological spaces and the various stories that emerge depending on locals' level of engagement with the space, as well as broader geopolitical landscape issues. Often when passing a particular archaeological feature, my colleagues will pause to tell me a story they have heard about the particular location or about their own engagement with the space. For example, in an area to the west of the site, my colleagues have shown me features from a no longer occupied historic settlement where one of my colleagues' grandfather was raised and even born. These stories can range from the mundane to the spectacular. For example, a mundane account includes how particular sets of stones are stacked on mounded features. While surveying archaeological features, I asked my colleagues why some of the mounds we encountered had stacks of stones on top, and it was shared with me that agricultural workers often stack limestone rubble that has collapsed from ancient Maya architecture on the raised mounds as places to rest while cutting sugarcane. The elevated seating prevents ants and other bugs from crawling on the workers while they pause to eat food, and the raised mounds offer the best location to catch the breeze and feel some relief from the hot sun which bakes the burnt ash of sugarcane. Other stories include more spectacular encounters and feature supernatural entities such as duendes or lloronas. For example, when surveying or touring the largest mounds that would have comprised the monumental core of the ancient city seen here on the slide, I'm often told stories of looters attempting to remove elaborate jade or gold artifacts, but who were stopped by supernatural forces, such as a large serpent, ancient bees, or duendes, the protectors of the forest. Interestingly, the perpetrators of this looting frequently mirror political discussions about who poses the biggest threat to the community. In 2015, when we were first touring the site, the looters were British quote-unquote researchers who brought in helicopters to remove large carved stones, but were eventually scared away by duendes. I suggest that in our initial season at Aventura, these stories about British looters expressed local anxieties about our work at the site and were meant to be a warning that to what happens if we were to remove valuable objects from the community. However, in following years as we returned, the looters in these stories were Guatemalans who swindled locals out of precious jade objects or who hid in sugarcane fields and looted large mounds at night. At the time, Guatemala was having the presidential elections, and much of the political discourse surrounded geopolitical tensions between Belize and Guatemala, which is understandable given the time. And most recently, the last time I was there in 2019, most The stories included looters that were corrupt officials who brought bulldozers and plowed right through large mounds to take valuables and building materials for themselves. In all of these variations, supernatural entities such as duendes and lloronas scare looters away, or ancient animals such as bees warn locals of the acts so that they can stop looters. In these stories, locals take pride in knowing their cultural resources, and they are charged with protecting their staying in the community. Here, locals' identification of objects deemed valuable by international audiences creates a sense of pride and responsibility related to belonging to the specific landscape. Through listening to these stories, I've learned that while these mounds are not prominently featured as heritage, quote unquote, upon which locals project connections to the Maya past, it is through the process of living in this space and encountering interesting objects, these hills become an anchor in which individual families physically root their coming to exist in this place. These roots serve to connect locals to the landscape vertically beneath them. Thus, while the community's ancestors fled to Corozal from Mexico, they generate a notion of belonging to this specific landscape in ways that doesn't hinge on long-term, uninterrupted ideas of belonging to some abstracted idea of the ancient Maya. Here, historic and Maya mounds are physical reminders of family histories, or similarly, valuable objects that become a source of local pride and protection. Bringing all this together highlights how the importance of archaeological features lies not in abstract identifications of them as heritage or important to history, but in that they are intimately and effectively tied to locals' own personal or family histories. As an archaeologist, I've been trained to approach archaeological sites as places with inherent value around issues of heritage. Viewing sites in this way creates an abstracted view of heritage, though, one that associates a site's value with its past significance. Yet, in this paper, I've attempted to highlight the ways that archaeological sites become meaningful in ordinary contexts. Together, the stories shared with me highlight that while the ancient city is not being used or interacted with in the same ways the ancient Maya would have, these ruins are not frozen in time. However, neither should these stories be romanticized as evidence of an uninterrupted local history. What this paper aims to show are the ways in which heritage and history are lived and the material consequences an approach that centers ruins as global or national heritage can have in the context of people's daily lives. This approach aims to show that while the region has seen the dramatic rise and fall of a series of imperial, state, and colonial polities, which have resulted in the significant population decline and movements, the perspective of ordinary people at Aventura, Belize, and across the Maya region is a story of reinvention and resilience. And as archaeologists, our efforts to engage local communities should center a collaboration with and acknowledgement of ordinary people's local history and expertise. Thank you for attending and listening to the talk today. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat or let Heritage Education Network Belize know, or if for some reason you can't get a hold of me through them, my email is up on the slide. It's zacharynissen2015@u.northwestern.edu. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day and enjoy the rest of the symposium.